Stanford D.school's Masters of Creativity. It's awesome to see folks joining us from Nigeria and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and San Jose and Dublin and Dallas and all over the world. It's so fun to get to learn together and grow together. We're delighted to today spotlight an amazing practitioner of creativity, Maria Brito. She needs no introduction, as you've already signed up for the session, so you know who she is, but I just want to tell you a little bit about her in case you stumbled into the Zoom somehow. She's an award-winning contemporary art advisor, entrepreneur, author, and curator out of New York. And she's recently written an amazing book called How Creativity Rules the World. It was published in March of this year. I highly recommend it. She's been selected by Complex Magazine as one of the 20 power players in the art world. And in 2020, she was named by Art News as one of the visionaries who gets to shape the art world. I could tell you all sorts of things about her amazing list of publications and product collaborations and project features, etc. But I'd rather dive into the content without her having to blush too much. So without further ado, we're going to talk about dispelling some myths. We're going to talk about connecting entrepreneurship and creativity and art. And hopefully we'll have lots of time to talk about your questions about how to apply these important principles in your context. So without further ado, would you please join me in welcoming Maria Brito to Stanford's Masters of Creativity?
Thank you, Jeremy, and everybody who is here. What an amazing group of people from all over the world. I appreciate each one of you joining from anywhere you are. Thank you for being here and for the intro. I am thrilled again. And yes, we are going to be talking about the myths surrounding creativity. I have enormous respect for what the D-school does, because it's one of the pioneers of creativity and thinking differently, which is all that we do want to encourage and is needed more and more, because we are at a juncture, we are at a time in history where the type of skills that are needed the most are not math or coding or, you know, things that are complicated, but the things that are most needed are creativity and also a spirit of entrepreneurship. Even if you are not an entrepreneur, but if you are at a company that belongs to someone else, you always want to be an intrapreneur. If you have expectations about what you want to do within that structure and how you want to change things and how you want to keep the wheel moving forward. And, you know, with that being said, I would love to talk about the myths, which I cover extensively in my book, because here's my background. I was born and raised in Venezuela, and my parents were very conservative. And so as a child, I was very good with music, and I wanted to be a singer. And when it was a cute thing for festivals and whatnot, my parents thought it was great. But when it became serious and I started getting phone calls from touring bands and auditions and, you know, record label executives, my parents said absolutely not. So they were like, you know, in this house, you have options. You can be a doctor, you can be an engineer, you can be an attorney. So those were my options. And I ended up going to Harvard Law, which absolutely loved and adored. It's a magical place. I obviously appreciate and love with enormous gratitude what I got out of that place, but I never really wanted to be an attorney. So I moved to New York City. I worked as a corporate attorney for 9 years in different places, small, big, medium law firms, always thinking the next law firm is going to be better. It was never better. The problem was that I was not happy doing something that I was not meant to do. And what I give you this information is because if I was able to shift my life the way that I did, I think anybody can. I think that I decided that I was going to start living for myself, and I went ahead and I opened a company that builds art collections for people with the intent that the art collections gain value over time, both, you know, emotionally, but obviously financially. And I branched out and I continued to do that. That was the center of the business from the beginning, but I started doing all the things, including product collaborations, online education. I have my own online course on creativity. I worked on TV. I have curated shows around the world because I wanted, nobody could say no to me since I became the owner of my business. That was 13 years ago that I opened this company. And a lot of people ask me, how do you do this? How do you go from being an employee in a law firm, an attorney, and build this name for yourself? And because the art world is not easy either. It's a very tough industry. It's closely guarded. And I always considered and wholeheartedly believe that the reason why I was able to get what I got is because of my creative thinking. So when some of my clients started to invite me to their, my clients who were collecting art invited me to their companies to give talks on creativity and to prepare workshops for them to teach their employees and their managers how to think differently, also to help them think like artists think. That mentality that is nimble, that is obviously innovative, that is laser focused on interesting things and not just bureaucracy and, you know, pushing papers and things like that. So when my clients invited me to their offices, I thought, well, this is so successful with the managers. Maybe I could create, and this was years in the making. So after doing this type of workshops for these companies for a while, without me having an intent to create some sort of consulting on that level, I said, well, maybe I can create a version that could live online for different people who aren't necessarily part of these companies. And so I developed a curriculum and a whole program on creative thinking. And this was all online. And I thought, well, if people online are also getting these results, maybe it's a good idea to write a book. And so that's why this book got published. I wrote it and got published last March, because it was a way for me to bring the message to more people, given the circumstances of the world. We're going through pandemics and wars and economic shifts, political shifts, societal shifts, and everything is too fast. Is like the future arrives faster than you ever think. And so the greatest antidote for that is to have a lot of ammunition in creative thinking. And in the mythology of people's, what has been taught to us, or how it the word creativity has been portrayed, is that is either something you have or you don't, is something that is for the very select few, or it's like, you know, events and moments of, you know, that lightning spark, and they are very rare. And so that's not true. And I went on to research this point with academics, with, you know, scientists, with researchers, with people who are deep into the field of, you know, analyzing the psychology and behavior of creativity. And I also went and I checked and studied the life of entrepreneurs and artists, because those are the people who interest me particularly. There's nothing, it doesn't mean that other people are not interesting. Those are the people that I like to study. And I found sufficient evidence that the truth is that, first of all, creativity is not genetic. Creativity cannot be passed. So you can't blame your parents for not having it. And but you actually can take responsibility for what you actually do every day to cultivate and nurture your creative thinking. So there are tons of studies already that prove that creativity is not genetic. The other thing is, well, the people who are already from the get-go say, I'm not creative. That's it. I am not creative. So there is a very interesting study. I'm sure Jeremy is super familiar with the studies of George Land, who already passed. And he was checking, he was called by NASA because he did have a consulting company. And NASA says, we need you to test all the astronauts and all our engineers, because we need the most creative people have to get the hardest tasks. We don't want the super math freaks. We just want the most creative people in the hardest tasks. And so Dr. Land tested them, and it worked out super nice. And he said, okay, you know what? I'm going to test kids now. So he tested these kids, but with a particularity. He wanted to test them again. He wanted to test them at 4, at 8, at 12, at 20, at 30. And what he got is that the same kids, and they got a test on creativity when they were 4 or 5, they scored at 98%, all of them, whatever. Then when they were in, 12, like they were 12, they started to go down, what they call the 4th grade slump or whatever, whatever age is 4th grade. I should know because I have 2 kids, but it's like maybe 10. And then when they tested the same kids at the age of 30, only 2% of those children scored at the highest level of creativity. And so what the answer is as we grow and get exposed to formal education and get drowned with media information that isn't necessarily true or right, when we start taking sides because we're pushed into this kind of silos that you are this and you are that, then we don't question things anymore. And children do not think like that. Children don't have to pick sides. Children don't have to be labeled. Children don't have to say, I'm this party or I'm this color, or, it's like a very different way of seeing the world. And all of us should really emulate kids in that sense, because it's very easy to get caught up in all the information that has been given to us. And we have to question things, because by questioning things is that we progress. And there's no way to move forward as a society, as individuals, as business owners, if we do not really question the status quo and what has been given to us. So that part of like, I'm not creative is usually not true, because we are proven that every human being comes packaged with everything they need to be creative. And how do you move forward in the sense of like, well, but I am already 40 or 30 and I lost all, my creativity? Well, there is also the concept of neuroplasticity that, as you may know, your brain changes after you repeatedly do something, and changes well into your adult years, your old years, whatever you want to call them. But there is a prerequisite to that. It's got to be a willing activity. If you don't believe that you can do it, and it's not bullshit. It's not, it's not law of attraction, manifestation. None of that bullshit is part of this. It's like, I want to do this. So willingly is the word that Michael Merzenich, who actually discovered neuroplasticity, so he's a super serious scientist, wrote that it has to be willing. And it takes 66 days for a new habit to sort of get in your, world and your sphere of knowledge and in your brain to actually take hold. So if you, for 66 days, agree to work on things that move forward your creativity, and also believe that you're getting the benefit and that you are getting creative, that you're thinking bigger, more important things that can be implemented, then you are going to see the results. But if you continue to think of yourself as non-creative, then obviously that's not going to pay off too much. And the other part of the mythology is that we have a right brain and a left brain, and if you have one or the other, then you're one thing or the other. Well, we do have 2 hemispheres, and that's true. They both need each other. We can't not operate as humans who are sound if we just have one, or like if one tends to overtake the other one. What happens is that, unfortunately, those are also ways for people to categorize and label people, and that's information that has been given to us that we have accepted. So if someone is very good at math, and let's say they are coding programs, let's say Mark Zuckerberg, for example, you're going to think, well, he's left-brained, right? But it turns out that all the marketing, all the like button, all the little things, all the logos, those are marketing things, and that's not left. That's right brain. Okay, so these things have to be integrated. What the man is brilliant. May you like him or not, But the parts that come together the same way that Steve Jobs did is the integration of left and right brain. I hate math. I absolutely do not like any of that. And yet I have an incredibly logical brain because I was an attorney for, 9 years. And so if I don't use both parts of the brain and you don't, it's going to be an upward hill no matter what. So do not use those terms anymore, because first of all, they are not accurate in the sense of what your brain can do. And second, yes, you do have a strengths and you have passions and you're good at certain things more than others, but you do need the combination of both parts of the brain to see you, if you do intend to bring creativity to the world in whatever shape or manner. You can be an organizational leader, you can be a dentist, you can also be an attorney and be creative in your marketing and the way that you do things, how you solve problems, how you write your drafts, and how you present your ideas in front of a jury. This is not for artists alone or designers. And this is also the other, I would say, misnomer is, oh, creativity, artistry, and whatnot. Well, artistic talent is one thing. Some people can play instruments just by they pick up the instrument, they are excellent at it without having to have classes. Some people can be in front of a canvas and create great compositions. That's artistic talent. And people have it. Not everybody has it, but some people have it. But that's not creativity, because again, creativity is your unique ability to come up with ideas of value that can be materialized. And there's a lot in that concept, because unique ideas of value, why is unique? Because they come from you and you alone, because you are a whole universe. You have a bringing. You grew up in a place where things were happening around you. You had a set of parents that were very unique as well. You had a specific type of education, and your experiences every day, as well as your expertise, whatever it is, all those things together have formed certain criteria and certain ideas in your mind. And so, those ideas of value have to serve someone. They are not just for you. I think that's important. They have to have value today or in the immediate future. And they have to be relevant, again, because they have to solve problems. They have to be of service of the world, or service of a community, the service of a piece of society or a niche. So that's what creativity is. And the other thing is, creativity is not one thing. It is not one event. It's an amalgamation of traits. And these are not also, traits that are incredible to get or expensive or difficult. The traits are having a vision and being authentic and being willing to be empathetic and staying curious. Staying curious throughout your life is so important. Being willing to spend time alone and in silence. Those are things, the amalgamation of all those things together is what makes people truly creative. And it's not an act of genius. It is a birthright, I would say, that human beings have, because if you analyze every other species, animals, plants, minerals, they do not have creativity. Animals can be really smart. Plants can figure out how to survive and thrive in the most complicated environments, so they are resilient. But human beings are the only ones who can come up with these incredible ideas and connect dots in ways that make things different, right? So those are kind of like the umbrella. There are more, but I don't want to just spend too much time on this. I just want to emphasize that creativity is yours for the taking. And that you have to be willing to nurture all these different skills on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be all at once or all these skills at the same time. Although the more you work on these things, the more you will see your ideas pour. And not only the ideas pour, but also ways in which you can find solutions to implement them, because ideas are a dime a dozen. You can have a million ideas, but it's how you actually make them a reality, which is so important. And that's the part of action, right? I mean, creativity as an abstract concept is good just for, books or, blackboards in classrooms and whatnot. But for our day-to-day life, the most important thing is to execute those ideas. And I wrote in my book, one of the best examples that I could have found was the career of Pablo Picasso, who is by certified by Guinness World Records, the most prolific artist in history. And what Picasso did was, like, he worked every day of his life until he died. Sometimes he did 2 canvases a day. Sometimes he did 4 drawings. Sometimes he was sculpting things and creating things in molds and taking a look at the guy who he had to see with for his lithographies and things like that. So it was like Picasso was not Picasso by chance. And this is very important. He was incredibly committed to enhancing his work on a daily basis. And I think it's also funny or, interesting to highlight that when Picasso died, he had a personal fortune of $500 million in 1972. That is $2.9 billion today. For anybody who thinks he had white privilege, no, forget about that. Picasso was born really poor. His mother was a housewife and his dad was a school teacher who had to move around a lot to actually support his family. This was a guy who was, yes, you can call him a genius if that is it, because that's the word that we have given to him. But he was also someone who was driven, and he was paying attention to his surroundings. He was very attuned. He was competitive. I'm not saying these are things that necessarily people have to pursue, but the trick of Picasso was that he worked every day, including weekends. So I've given you so much. So is there anybody who can add? As somebody asked here, the reference to the scientist and research, yes, George Land, that's his name. And he did this with his wife, Beth. And I think Beth is alive, but George is not.
Is there, I feel like there was one other study that you mentioned. It wasn't the George Land one. Was there a second study?
I said, okay, so the ones about genetics, so here's the deal. The ones about genetics are so inconclusive that I didn't even mention them in my book, because I checked like 12. There was one about a set of twins, for example. Oh, twins have such shared genetics. Let's analyze them. So they weren't even worth it. I mean, they were not worth mentioning because, or quoting, because they never really reached any conclusion. So about genetics, the only thing that actually supports clearly what I'm trying to say is, for example, Jean-Baptiste Barbeau, who is at Yale, says there's no genetics. And the only thing that determines creativity is this amalgamation of skills that I was talking about. So Baptiste Barbeau is at Yale. And I think he also, I'm not sure if he's at Pace University in New York as well, but I know he's an assistant professor at Yale. So you can look him up. He backs up this idea that creativity is not genetic, because nobody has been able to prove it. And if that were the case, then you would have all the siblings of Michelangelo would be amazing artists, and they're not. And Madonna's 7 siblings would be Madonna's, and they are not. So genetics is really not at all considered creative, or, you cannot pass it along. If that was the one, yes, Michael Merzenich discovered neuroplasticity. That's true.
Michael, oh yeah, that may be what you were referring to.
Oh yeah, Michael Merzenich. He's like, I think it's Marzenich, I think. But if you look that, Google it up, it will show up. He's gotten a little tiny book that is available on Amazon about his research on neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, so So I have already given you a lot of the myths. So what else? I would love to go in the direction of why this is important for entrepreneurship and how it's connected to arts and artists. And so basically, creativity is the lifeblood of entrepreneurship, because people who go into business for seriously and for the desire of exploring, being entrepreneur is being an adventurer, right? I mean, you do it because like you're excited about business, you're excited about ideas, you're excited about service, you're excited about testing what you got out in the world. And if you truly want to succeed as an entrepreneur, you can't come to market with the same things that are out there, right? Because we live in a world that has everything for everybody. It is very, very populated with options. It is saturated too. Every little niche gets saturated very quickly because people find abilities to copy each other fast. If you do want to secure the future of whatever you do as an entrepreneur, you'll better be creative. And that really means that you're going to have to pivot many times and accept them and embrace them as part of what you're doing. And you're going to craft your strategies and your ideas from a very unique standpoint. And this is really not that difficult, because what I said before is that you have a set of characteristics and experiences from the place where you live, how you grew up, the school that you went to, the books that you read, and how you interpret information, because we may be even reading the same book and you and I are going to end up interpreting very differently. So coming up with that unique idea, sometimes people think is so difficult, but it's not, because you're going to connect the dots in very different ways. What usually takes for a business to succeed is that you're going to have to tweak that idea many times. I really don't know of any entrepreneur who launches something day one and that takes on and gets all the rounds of capital and then it goes into an IPO, right? I mean, every business goes through many different iterations in their early stages. And once they are mature businesses too, that's why Facebook is no longer Facebook but Meta. That's why, like Apple didn't stay with the Lisa, right? And so because we are constantly evolving, if we do want to bring ideas and profit from them and serve the world at the same time. So that's why entrepreneurship is deeply intertwined with creativity, no matter what. And so I have spent an enormous amount of time studying both entrepreneurs and artists, because I think fundamentally they are the same. Basically, artists start with a blank canvas and entrepreneurs start with just an idea, and they start working and giving shape to either the canvas or the idea. And so the beauty of this is that you move the wheel forward. You don't have to ask permission to anybody. And so there is a lot of authenticity and there is a lot of independent thinking and critical thinking if you are one or the other, whether you're an artist or an entrepreneur, because you are believing that you have that capability to bring something to the world that is unique and that is worth people's whiles, right? Like people want to see what you have to say or create. And the word artist is very ample. We're talking about filmmakers and we're talking about painters and sculptors and anybody who considers themselves artists, obviously participate of this. And I think that everybody should consider themselves in a way an artist, because it's this materialization of ideas. And or you can also consider yourself an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, because you have confidence in your ideas and that there is a way to make them a reality. Of course, you have to be attuned to reality to know that those things can happen, right? And one of the things that I like to bring to my students or when I do the workshops is the concept of attention and paying attention, because that is really a very precious commodity nowadays, that we are connected to our phones 24/7. We receive news, texts, tweets, etc., emails, and we're crossing the street, we're reading the phone and like listening to a podcast. And so yes, we can operate like that, but there is a price to pay for that, and that is that you diminish your creativity. Multitasking and being all the time putting your attention in a million places is counterproductive. No matter if you're a millennial or Gen Z and you think you can do it, it's counterproductive, because the leaps of human being evolution in the brain don't happen just because we have millennials and Gen Z who can do that. The leaps of evolution in the brain take thousands of years. So it's been thousands of years that we have had the brain that we have. So just because we have TikTok, it's not going to change. Okay. So what that means is that you have to protect your attention at all costs, because that's what most people F up because they are not paying attention. And that's terrible, because it's not lack of like smart. It's not that they are not intelligent enough. It's not that they don't have the ideas. It's that they are not paying attention. And what I mean by this is there are hundreds of thousands of opportunities that are happening in the periphery usually, right? Like peripheral vision is like, are you just looking to what's in front of you, or are you also paying attention to things that are happening in the margins, in the intersections of society, in the intersections of industries? And they usually have an adaptation to whatever that it is that you do. So it really doesn't matter whatever your field is, there will always be intersections and crossroads, and there will always be things that are happening way outside of your area of expertise that have an impact in yours and that can be brought in. And I think that what's happening really, and has happened for a long time, is that because of our increased level of distraction and it's overwhelming also for people to the point that they don't even want to see, then all these opportunities are not being grabbed. All these things are not being explored, because there is all this other stuff that's happening in our phones and whatnot, and in our computers and in our offices, that while you think that they might be enriching, or you're increasing knowledge, or you're having a moment of escape, they are taking away your attention from you. So what I suggest to people to do is, for example, you can, first of all, one thing that is super important is to spend time alone and in silence every day. At least, I would suggest 15 minutes. That's a lot for a lot of people. I would, if you can start with 5 and move up from there. It doesn't have to be a deep meditation or anything like that, but I would say just spend 5 minutes alone every day in silence, without background music or without phones and dogs and kids and partners. I even have to tell people, if you need to lock yourself up in the bathroom, please do, because I get it that, there's a lot of barriers to this, but I think that's mental hygiene, and it's very important. The same way that, you take a shower every day, you have to really let your brain take those breaks. The more often, the better, because it will allow you to start seeing things that you missed before. One of the ways that I suggest to people to affix your attention is to get in the habit of writing longhand every day with pen and paper. And that's because also scientists and researchers, this was conducted by Princeton. I don't know the name of the people, it's in my book, but I don't remember the scientists who did it. But it's a Princeton research where the students were undergrad students, and they were measured in the ones who were typing and the ones who were taking notes longhand. So the ones who were typing scored as less information processing and ultimately didn't really get much from the class than those who were actually writing longhand. And it's the same thing if you want to really become creative. You have to get in the habit of letting your ideas flow directly from your brain to your pen. And there is a second benefit, and it has to do with the attention. It's very difficult to write longhand for 10 minutes on a notebook if you're trying to do something else, like almost impossible. It actually forces you to be in the moment. And I promise you, if you do the longhand writing 10 minutes every day for 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're going to start finding a lot of incredible ideas that you didn't think about before. And when people, I gave a whole long list in my book of what people can think about, right? I mean, I give prompts like, starting with your to-do list to like your dreams and goals for the week, to just whatever is in your head, right? I mean, whatever is in your head at the moment, just let it out. Whether that is, I don't like my neighbor, or like, I want to go on vacation to, South California, whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're fixing your attention for a certain amount of time, and you're allowing those ideas to flow out of your brain. But you always want to have an intention. You're doing this because you want to become more creative. You're doing this because you want to explore your ideas, because you think that there is something inside of you that can be so much better than where you are right now. It doesn't mean that where you are is not good, but that there are places, metaphorically speaking, that you could get to that are more interesting than where you are. And so I encourage all of you to try this for an extended period of time. There is no instant gratification. Creativity takes time and effort, but it's not a forever thing. It is a lot of daily habits that are cheap, available, and widely, tested, that can give you that edge. And that's the thing. For people who do these little things every day, those are the ones who end up getting the edge over the ones who are not doing it. And I think that once you have the knowledge that all these things together can bring so much satisfaction, because creativity is all about that satisfaction, that self-actualization, that passion, the things that you care about, that you can materialize, that you can take out. And again, like, it doesn't really matter if you're a designer, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an artist, whatever it is that is burning inside of you, to see it out in the world, to see it materialize, to see people benefiting from it, is one of the greatest highs that any human being can aspire to. Okay, so Jeremy.
Thank you, Maria. First of all, tremendously inspiring and enlightening. I love what you said at the end there about it's cheap or affordable. Maybe,
Yeah.
I've heard the expression, I think Austin Kleon says about his newsletter, it's free, but not cheap.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. It's free, having a notebook, writing longhand, or taking 5 minutes to be in silence every day. It's free. It's not like picking up golf where you go, I got to have clubs. That's, whatever. Nothing against golf, by the way. I've learned, by the way, just as an aside, golf tip for anybody out there, if you pick up the ball and just throw it, you tend to do better. So that's what I do. But what you're saying about the very affordable attention and intention, I wonder if you could talk more about that notion of intention, because what you said at the end, that you have an intention when you fix your attention to be more creative, to explore what's inside you. What is the opposite of that intention, or what's the absence of that intention?
Well, I think that if you are doing things randomly, it's like, I believe in serendipities too. And I believe in when you find something that you were not looking for. But that usually happens to people who have intentions to do something else, if that makes sense. So the intentionality is one of the most studied aspects of creativity. There are a lot of different people in the field of psychology of creativity and the intentionality of creation. And that's why when I talked about neuroplasticity and Michael Merzenich and what he's did is that he proved that you can change your brain if you intend to do it. He used the word willingly, right? And so we have intentions every day for the things that we do or we do not. The opposite, like Jeremy was asking, is like living your life randomly, right? I mean, it's like aimlessly. Okay, I do this, I do that, I get a paycheck. I don't think that entrepreneurs have that kind of flat line because there's so much burning passion and you do have to make money to live. So, you know, might as well just have the intention every day. So I think that the intention to create, that willingness has to come from within. And that is where you decide where you want to go. Because it's totally up to you, right? I mean, what is the passion that is burning you? Like, what is it that you want to do? What is that great idea? What is that need? If you happen to have a complaint or you have like you're always thinking, why is this never fixed? Or why this has to be this way? Then, you know, that is a very clear idea or actually signal that you're the one who has to do, you know, the talking. You're the one who has to research this. You're the one who has to create something, right? Because that's where the greatest products, services, and inventions happen, when they come from needs of things that are in society or that are in a system or that are in your place, that where you live or whatever, that are not working out. And you're like, gosh, I wish somebody would fix this. Maybe it's not necessarily your area, but you could explore it, right? So the intentionality is that day-to-day desire, right? I mean, it could even be like, I want to inspire my people through social media. I have that intention. Mm-hmm. How do I do this every day, right? And you may have different intentions for different projects, for different products, for different things, right? But it's got to be something that has, I think it's a bigger thing than a goal. It's almost like the soul behind things, right?
Not a goal, but a soul. That's good.
Yes, it's not a goal, it's a soul behind why you do what you do and what you're looking for, what you're looking. And what I was saying about the serendipities is that many times people who have intentions and intentionality and willingness to do something, they stumble upon something else, right? I mean, and that's a wonderful thing, but it usually happens because people had a prior idea of how much intent and intention they wanted to put behind their day-to-day activities.
Yeah, you don't hear of you do hear, as you said, you do hear a lot about serendipity, but serendipity strikes the person who's looking. You know, every great, and there are plenty of stories of like penicillin, right? And Louis Pasteur's like the mold. Yes. He was looking. And the fact that it caught him off guard doesn't mean he wasn't caught off guard while he was napping. He was caught off guard while he was, despite the fact that napping is a good tactic, by the way. But right, but the point is, you have to be looking. And I think what you're saying, and you know, we heard from Liz and Molly yesterday, America's favorite workplace cartoonists, as I like to say, after Dilbert. But one of the things that they were talking about yesterday was having a lens through which you're viewing the world, and the power of that there's a problem. And to me, it's related to this idea of soul that you mentioned, that you have a problem you're trying to solve. And I think for a lot of us, if we're just sleepwalking through the day, or we're just kind of going through the routine, there's actually not a problem that we care about solving. And a lot of times the world fails to reveal its inspiration to us if we aren't looking. And, you know, like they say of a writer, everything is grist for the mill. It's because they know they need to write. And one of the things I would say, just in my own personal practice, I'd share as an example, is having some kind of quota. You know, I've said I want to share something that's inspired me every single day. Well, what's happened I mean, that's just a personal goal. It's not like a work commitment or anything like that. But one of the things that's happened for me is it's like nature abhors a vacuum. Because I've made that decision, all of a sudden I start looking for inspiration in a different way. And, you know, I heard Thomas Edison had invention quota. Once every 10 days, he had to have a minor invention. But I think it's things like that. It's like, it's almost creating the expectation of discovery in a way.
Yes, yes. And you know that one of the best things that can happen to people if they want to come up with great ideas is to put themselves on a deadline, because it is a shortening of resources, right? I mean, every time, but again, you've got to be committed. You have to have that intention. And nobody would put themselves on a deadline if they don't have an intention, right? But that's why having that type of artificially imposed, you know, deadlines, if you will, or maybe some they are not artificial, maybe they are necessary, like creating a vaccine, for example, right? There was a very big pressing deadline looming, and they had to put all their resources there, right? And the same thing with money, right? I mean, if you say to someone, I'll fund your business forever and ever, and then, you know, maybe one day it'll take off. I mean, no, I think that the most successful businesses get this amount of money and they figure out how to make those resources work. They stretch them. They work with little things, you know, they scrap pennies. And then if that worked, they get another round, right? But it's not like, oh, there is an infinite pool of money here for you to kind of keep getting until maybe you take the business off the ground. It doesn't happen like that. But those are people who have an intention. And again, that is only something that has to motivate you. It's got to be something that moves you and excites you. And it's not written in stone forever, but you have to explore it enough before giving up. Because that's the other thing, right? I mean, I do not think anybody should be just like forever married to a specific idea that doesn't pan out just because. I think, but there is a fine balance between having patience and persistence and grit, and you know, kind of like pushing something that's not viable. And I think that's like important not to attach the value of a failure. I wrote in my book that failures are an indication that you stretch yourself a lot, and those are very, very good for creativity because you push yourself out of your comfort zone. And the thing that failed was an idea, not you. So it is like crucial to understand that you're going to fail. If you're looking to be creative, relevant, stand out in a crowded market, you're going to fail a few times. And that is very important.
You know, there's a children's book. We've got these books. I have 4 daughters and we have these children's books. And one of them, I think it's called Rosie Revere Engineer. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes, I have that book. I mean, my kids are old now, but we used to have that book.
It's so good, right? And there's this, I can't remember exactly the line, but it's something like your flaming first flop was a raging success. Now on to the next, right?
Yes.
It's such a great attitude to instill that, yeah, this is one failure among many on this journey.
There is a question from a thief, but I'm not sure I understand. How one can boost creativity in an environment around the person is not healthy due to any reason. I'm not sure I understand it, but it seems interesting. I think it was typed fast. So if a thief wants to rewrite it, that was 2 minutes ago. I hope a thief is still here.
Atif, do you want to come onto stage for a moment and chat with Maria about this? If so, just turn on your video and we can bring you up here.
Thanks, Maria. Basically, what I want to ask is that, like, how, particularly in these circumstances with COVID and everything, with social recession and everything, when the surrounding and the environment is so much negative and sometimes even toxic as well, how one can boost the creativity?
Well, listen, the whole kind of world crisis with the pandemic, obviously separating teams and having social distance hasn't been very positive for creativity, but creativity is individual. And this is something that I really want to stress. How it starts is with each one of you. And then if you run teams, you encourage them. I don't know if you guys have, I'm sure you have, been to brainstorming sessions where everybody saves the world and then nothing happens, right? And it's because to be able to boost creativity in teams, you have to have leaders not waste too much time on brainstorming sessions and encourage individual creativity for each person. If I understand correctly, your question too is, where do you find inspiration to keep yourself going through tough times, right? I think that the world is vast in resources that are also not expensive, that are within your reach. I think that boosting creativity is something very within you. Going outside, spending time in nature, walking around a city, and paying attention to what's happening in that city, taking notes. It's also, like I said before, you can go to the notepad that I mentioned and a pen and write your impressions of. It sounds so stupid, but nobody does it. And that's the thing. It seems like, why would I go out and do that? Because you're going to find impressions. You're going to affix your attention. And if you can't really remember the details of what's happening around you, then you can write them down and start there, right? I mean, there are books. Books are filled with incredible ideas that boost creativity, and not necessarily just in the field of creativity. You can read biographies, you can read autobiographies. Film is a particular, favorite of mine that really opens up ideas, thoughts, how inspiration. I may be engrossed in the story, I may be like one of the characters. So creativity applied to business and not applied to business is all around us, and you can really use it for you and expand where you are right now without even having to leave your house. I don't want people to be in their houses, honestly, because that's terrible. But like, what I'm saying is, there is not a lot that's needed to get this done. It's individual work. I hope that it was good. Can you please speak about how can creativity, thought, action be transformative leadership? Listen, leadership is all about creativity, because if you're a true leader, or if you follow a true leader, that person has to show up differently. That person has to be authentic. That person has to be unique. And there are leaders who inspire good things, and there are leaders who inspire riots, and it doesn't really matter. The point that I'm trying to make is that leadership and creativity are very together and intertwined. I think that the greatest leaders are always very, very smart and creative, and the way that they present their ideas is not what you have heard every day. To be able to elaborate arguments, sentences, statements, emails, speeches, whatever it is, that moves you, you have to come with very, very unique ideas. And if you are good enough and good enough at crafting the sentences, statements, ideas, etc., and communicating them around them, then you are a good leader. And that involves that you will manifest people taking action because you can craft that message, and that takes time. And maybe it takes time, and then you are able to go on a roll all the time. But we all know that all the presidents of the United States have speechwriters. We all know that the biggest leaders in companies have communications people around them. So these things are not natural. It's a lot of work, and make sure to understand that. And while I think that there are a lot of people who are charismatic by nature and they can speak great words, there's a lot of training that goes behind that.